Hi, all. It's Laura from Homeschooling with Classic Stories. We're on the second part of week 6, The Tale of Mrs. Tiggle Winkle. Tiggy Winkle. I'm never going to get her name right. Okay, so what we did this week, to start off, I wanted to show you what we did for movement this week. The movement activity that we did was indoors. It doesn't have to be indoors, but we did it indoors, so that's very helpful. If you are stuck in the house, maybe you have COVID restrictions in your area, or if it's rainy or cold or whatever. So, what we did was the story was based on the idea. It wasn't based on laundry, but it's sort of centered a lot on laundry. And so, what we did was we took clothespins, put them in different places around the room, and my son had to take off a clothespin, stick it to his shirt, and run to the next one, stick it to his shirt, and run to the next one. And then finally, I had him put it on his large bear, and he had to put all of the clothespins on. And so he just did that in the living room, making sort of a circle. As for clothespins, I kind of wanted to give you some different ideas. We used clothespins that look like this, which is great because he's using his full hands for more like gross motor because we did a fine motor earlier in the week. So that was really good, and you can obviously do it in both cases. He was able to do this. I don't know with regular, so I'm thinking about like the traditional wooden clothespins that like I imagine. We don't have any of those, but I think those are more like this instead of like a full hand movement. But if you have those, they should work too. But these were really easy for my son to use. Before you start the activity, it would be really good to make sure that your kid can actually do this because there is nothing more frustrating than setting an activity up, getting your kid super hyped up about it, and then realizing that they just don't have the physical capability. So that can be really frustrating. So make sure you try it out as you're gathering up supplies, like, just hand it to them and see if they could do this with their hands. So these are the style that I used. These are just the style that we have in our house because we have drying racks. I wouldn't recommend going out and buying clothespins, especially if you're in like the United States or Canada, where I think dryers are a bit more common. If you have drying racks, you probably already have some of these. We have a lot of them. I don't know how many we ended up putting out. To be frank with you, we just have a lot of them. And so this actually took him a decent amount of time. I thought the activity would go really quickly. But basically this motion, clipping it to his shirt, and then running to the next one went fast. But then again, this motion, clipping it to the shirt, that was time consuming. And I actually did, he asked me to time him, so we started using a timer, so he did it multiple times instead of just once. And he wanted to see like how fast he could do it. There were no injuries. I didn't even think about like injuries until after we had finished. But of course, like if your child is not great at these, I don't think that they hurt. Um, but if your child is perhaps a little bit more sensitive, maybe they will think that they hurt if they accidentally clip themselves or something. So be sure you're aware of what product you're using as far as like injuries as well. Um, that was not a problem with these particular clips. I had a few other ideas if you don't have access to these clothespins. You could also use something like a chip clip. That is going to be a little more injury prone, so do keep in mind with chip clips, as well as it's still using this motion, which is the skill that we're trying to go with, besides like getting some movement exercises in. Um, so be aware that it's still the same movement, but in my opinion, it's a little bit harder. And the last thing that I thought that perhaps you could use is gator clips. That's what I call them. I don't know what other people call them. This is a tiny one. I couldn't find any giant ones in our house, but these things. If you have some of the like really big giant ones that you use your whole hand for, those would work too. But of course, in my opinion, these are the most dangerous. And also, I find them very hard to use myself. But this could be an option if you just don't have anything else. But really, as long as they're doing like the full hand motion, and then it's something that they can safely clip to themselves. Again, running around in a circle. I put his large stuffed animal at the end for him to clip to the stuffed animal, and that was the end. That is when the timer, I clicked the timer. but you don't have to do any of that. You can simply do it as a simple movement or even as a collection of these activity, however you want to choose to do it. The next thing that we did this week was for science. For science this week, I'm going to call it a volume study, but just to be honest, the skills that we were working on this week. So, do you remember in the story, she happens first upon a bucket that's underneath a waterfall and it's overflowing in the waterfall? So that's sort of the idea that I wanted to make apparent to him. So I just took a simple measuring cup. I just put a cup of water in it. If you are not a cup of water person, 250 mils, however you want to do it in your life is fine. But the point was, is he saw that it was an exact measurement. So even if you wanted to do like a half cup of water or something, just make sure it's to a line that your child can see. This is a really simple activity, but what we did was we took a variety of cups and items. So like we have some smaller cups like this. So like this is just like an old sippy cup. I also gave him like my coffee mug in the morning because I know he likes to play with that and I don't normally let him touch it. And then like also some like various shape things. So like tiny bowls and things. And so what I had him do was he still had that same cup of water and he poured it into the different things. And in this, it doesn't look like that much water because this bowl was actually about a cup and a half. And then had him pour it back in to see, oh, it was in fact the same amount of water. And doing that within the various shapes to see that it doesn't really matter what it looks like to the eyes, it's still the same amount of water regardless of the shape that you're pouring it into. So I'm going to call that a volume study, but what we were really trying to get at was the idea that it doesn't change. Just because it looks different based on the container you put it in, it's still the same amount of water. And that's what my purpose was for this week. Um, Not for him to necessarily read the cup, though you could, if your child is ready to talk about cups, half cups, quarter cups, all of that, or similarly mills on the other side, it doesn't really matter. But that's what we did for science this week, was to make sure that we understood that just because something is in a different container doesn't mean that the volume changes. I did use the word volume. I don't try and shy away from, I guess, sciencey or math type language, but I don't think that he understands what volume is. And I didn't really intend for him to. The reason that I use words like volume are so that he's familiar that there is a word out there of volume and it's associated with this idea. So it's really just word associations, not true understanding. All right, let's take a look at our last thing. So in the comments, in the section down below, you'll see the link to this worksheet. It was just a simple worksheet this week on our letter study. So for our letter study, you'll notice that this looks very similar to the one that you did for Peter Rabbit, in the sense that you are just trying to match together uppercase letters and lowercase letters. So all that you have to do for this one is just go through and you're spelling out the word wash tub. Again, it was a laundry-based story this time. So wash tub, you'll notice that they're in little bubbles. When I presented this to my son, I actually intended him to use crayons to color in the bubbles. He didn't want to do that, so I didn't push it, but that was the original intention of the worksheet, was for your child to color in the bubbles. If you have perhaps a child who likes coloring more than mine does, maybe have them color in the bubbles. So I started by just asking him to pick out how many letters are there, and he counted. There are 7 letters that we're going to be looking at. And so he took out 7 crayons, and then he did the worksheet, which I will show you. Again, he didn't want to do the bubbles. Sorry, there you go. He did not want to do the bubbles. He just wanted to circle, which I'm not going to argue about. So you see that he just chose to circle to do the matching part. We went in order, practicing sounding out. That is a skill that my child is capable of doing. If your child is still working on letters, so like is actually working on the letter matching, or is working on memorizing what sounds the letters make, that would be a good thing to practice with this. Wherever your child is, you can modify this. So like If your child is still learning what an uppercase letter and a lowercase letter look like, just focus on that. If your child is focusing on letter sounds, focus on that while you do it. And if your child is working on some basic phonics, then go ahead and put that through as well. That's where mine is, so I'll show you how we did it. So we started with the letter W. He circled these two. What sound does the letter W make? Wah. And so he started there with wah. And then we did the A, ah. And then he is starting digraphs in a very, very easy way. SH happens to be one of the easier digraphs, so he got this one. I did have to point out to him that they were next to each other. That was not something that he noticed. So if your child is also in the introducing digraph stage, there's an SH together. Look at them. I did have him do the sounds individually to start with, so s and huh, but then we did sh when the two were together, and then t, th. So he sounded out this word. He was very proud of himself at the end of it for being able to figure out what it was. And of course, the context clue of there being bubbles and the whole theme about laundry were very helpful to him figuring out what this word was. So, again, I hope that your child chooses to color in the bubbles rather than circling, but mine didn't want to. You'll notice that he chose 7 different colors, though. He is very onto Halloween colors right now, so that's why you see that they are those particular colors. Anyway, that is it for this week. Again, make sure that you get that worksheet in the link below, and I will see you next week to start on our week 7 story so that I never have to say Mrs. Tiggy Winkle again. All right, I will see you next week. Bye bye.